Welcome back to another Adventure News Flash Update. Today I want to talk about the 2025 390 Adventure, the specifications, what we should expect, but not only that, we've also seen a 390 Enduro in the spy footage as well. So is it going to be off-road capable? What componentry is different to the 390 Adventure? So let's find all that out, well, now.
Start it up.
There's a fair bit to unpack here, but we need to remember that these are spy videos. This isn't officially released by the manufacturer. There's no confirmation about specifications. Fortunately, we can get a lot of information from the Duke 390, which is based off the same platform of the bike we're seeing here. So we know the motor is going to be a 390cc motor, making 45 horsepower, 41 Newton meters of torque, an EFI single with a 6-speed gearbox. The other nice feature that we're pretty sure we're getting here is ride-by-wire. So that means things like cruise control are possible. Whether they'll put it more on the value-orientated style of motorcycle that the 390 is a question that we'll have to wait and see. But it would be fantastic to see that feature trickle down into this segment of the market. And if someone's going to do it, why not KTM? The only question I have is, with the bump in CCs, have KTM been able to lower where peak horsepower and particularly peak torque coming in the RPM range? Because one of the downfalls of the 390 in the current iteration was that it was a very revvy motorcycle, so it didn't have the typical tractor factor, that low down accessible torque that you would love to have for off-road. Now, it wasn't terrible, but you're definitely noticeable that it really liked to be kept on the boil, which made it fantastic on the road and carving up the twisties, but not so great when stuff got difficult off-road. I think that's one of the major things on my mind, and I'm really hoping to see when this bike is eventually released. Okay, let's get into what we're all here for, and that's the 390 Enduro, because we haven't heard about this bike in a decently long time. Old Solid here was getting worried that maybe KTM got cold feet, but it doesn't look to be the case, because we've seen the bike in these videos alongside the 390 Adventures that we know are coming out, and the bike looks to be fairly far along in development, as far along as the 390 Adventure. So I would say that it's a pretty decent bet that the 390 Enduro will be released alongside or just after the 2025 390 Adventures that we know are coming. So the spy shots do reveal some very interesting details. So the biggest thing that jumps out to me with the 390 Enduro is this is definitely trimmed down and a bare bones version of the 390 Adventure. It looks to have a 21/18 wheel setup, which is a big relief, because that means it's got the best wheel combination for going off-road. Of course, they're spoke wheels, so this really means that KTM are intending this bike to be its most serious off-road machine in the 390 lineup. The high front mudguard as well is positive, a small detail, but it does mean that you can fit really aggressive dirt tires, and it also has the design language of the 690 Enduro. All positive signs that this is going to be quite a dirt capable bike. One thing in this video that stood out to me is the claim that the 390 Enduro has more travel than the 390 Adventure, which to my eyes is quite difficult to tell from at least the footage we have. The question for me is it actually longer travel, or do both bikes have different wheel sizes, which also could account for a disparity? It would certainly have more clearance than the exact same bike with a 1917 wheel combo. It's very hard to tell in this video what wheel sizes are what on these bikes. I'm pretty confident to say the 390 Enduro is a 21/18 wheel setup, and I do hope that it does have more travel than the 390 Adventure, as that would really allow the 390 Enduro to solidify itself as the off-roader's choice out of the 390s. Now, some eagle-eyed viewers are going to point out that the exhaust is low slung and under the engine. That is a bit of a downside if you're doing the design of an off-road machine. Obviously, that's a design flaw where it was originally intended as a road-only motorcycle and it got developed into more and more of an off-road application, but it's not a deal breaker. A fairly serious bash plate should sort you out and keep that protected. Other details we can see is the tank looks identical to the 390 Adventure, as does most of the other componentry. Of course, the bigger question is how much will they save by taking all those plastics off the bike and keeping it trimmed and condensed? It's still got the same motor, the same chassis, and the same exhaust system, so I would expect that this bike isn't going to be considerably lighter than the 390 Adventure for 2025, and the speculation there is that the bike will roughly be the same weight, maybe a little bit more than the current version on sale, which means it will be in the low to mid 170 kilogram mark, which isn't what a lot of people want. They want the hyper light rally bike, but this is a little of an unrealistic expectation for this bike. This is a known quantity. We know what a motor and chassis combination already produce with this bike. You really should be expecting something in the 170 kilogram mark. Now with this 390 Enduro, it might be a little bit different. With the weight savings, you might be able to expect something in the 160 kilo range. How far down into the 160 kilos, I don't know. I would expect, on the positive side of things, I would be happy to see this in the high 160s. Would I love to see KTM throw the kitchen sink at this like a proper dual sport like the 690 Enduro? Yes, I would. I don't think that that's possible to be able to do that and still make this a value-oriented motorcycle that they produce in India. Those two things don't really seem to be on the manufacturer's to-do list. Super lightweight, high performance, yet still maintain that value. It's a very hard combination to bring together. And the question that follows on from that if that is going to be the weight, will a lot of people be disappointed if it's almost as heavy as the 390 Adventure? I think that this is a very interesting bike, and I can't wait to see this thing and get a leg over and see how this thing performs. But I'd love to know your thoughts about the bike. Let me know in the comments section down below. One thing that really jumps out from this video with the 390 Adventure in the video is that we see spoke wheels on this bike, but we do see that this is clearly a different wheel size to the 390 Enduro. So this confirms for me that the 390 Adventure will have a 1917 wheel combination in order to differentiate it from the 390 Enduro. But let me jump back in here. I've been in the editing room working on this video, and the more I see that clip of the Enduro and the 390 next to each other, the more I'm starting to think that they actually have the same wheel size, and it might be the aggressive tires on the Enduro making it look like a larger wheel size. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Does that look like a 21-18 wheel combo on both bikes to you? Or does it look like an 1821 on the Enduro and a 1917 on the 390 Adventure? I'd like to see the 1821 on both, as well as the 1917 option available on the 390 Adventure. I hope that we do get a cast wheel variant of the 390 Adventure to offer it to the people that spend more of their time commuting, adventure touring, and want the added performance on road of a cast wheel setup. The other thing that really stands out here is just how far along they are in the development process of this bike. Now, given these are still test mules, but they definitely look like they're fairly far along in the development stage. Slap a few stickers on and pretty up these bikes and they look like they could basically sit on a showroom floor. So this signifies that I think KTM are in the late stage development of this bike, and we should expect to perhaps see these bikes revealed at the end of the year at the big motorcycle shows. And if we don't see them then, I think a Q1, Q2, or at a stretch Q3 release. So I would title these as a 2025 model year motorcycle. I talked about this in a recent video, specifically on the DR650, of how I'm really worried that these bikes that have been around for a long time, that are grandfathered in, these bikes are being phased out by tighter and tighter restrictions. And when you look around at the options, they're not being replaced in big numbers. But when you get a little bit creative with your thinking, bikes like this 390 Enduro really could sit in place of bikes like the outgoing DR650. But here's a bit of a curveball to think about here. The 390 Enduro makes 45 horsepower. That's roughly on par with the DR650. The DR650 is also 165 kilograms wet. Now, if KTM can get the 390 Enduro sub 170 kilos, it's roughly in the same ballpark as the DR650, except you're getting all the modern niceties of EFI, 6 speeds, TFT screen, everything that comes with that, the Bluetooth connectivity and all the electronic wizardry that comes along with it, so it's be super safe with switchable ABS, etc, etc, etc. So you get all those modern mod cons with DR650 weight and performance. Now, whether it will have the power coming in low like the DR650 is famous for, who knows? But it is food for thought. Is this a potential replacement for the middleweight dual sport we've all been screaming for? Is it a little heavier than we like? Quite possibly. It's certainly got a lot of features, at least from this spy footage, that is super encouraging and super exciting. Think about what's on the market that directly competes with the 390 Enduro when it hits the showroom floor. A modern 6-speed EFI single designed mostly for the dirt. Yes, it's got road bike heritage, but it is leaning heavily towards the dirt. What other bikes do you directly compare it to that are from the modern era? There really isn't a lot on the market unless you start dipping into the scrambler world, and then you're paying a significant premium for aesthetics. So this really could be the modern dual sport for the masses, even though really it's a road bike that turned into an adventure bike that's now a dual sport called an Enduro. Completely ridiculous if you were to tell someone not into motorcycles that's the way that it came about. But really could potentially be in a class of its own and answer a lot of complaints that people are dissatisfied with in the market, with adventure bikes in the middleweight category being too heavy, but dual sports being light enough but not having enough power, like the KLX 300 and the CRF 300L, and bikes like the DRZ just being too old to be practical in the modern era. Here comes KTM with a bike that makes enough power for people to be happy. Sure, it's not the lightest bike, but it's still manageable. I think this potentially could low-key be a very popular bike when it comes out for getting off-road in a big way. If it's getting more bums on motorcycle seats and into the dirt, I think it's a good thing. And as always, don't forget to stay shiny side up.